The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and decay. The sky, once a deep azure, now a perpetual grey, hung heavy over the remnants of a world that had forgotten what a blue sky looked like. Ange Postecoglou stood on a small rise overlooking the remains of what had been her community. The makeshift shanties and tents littered the landscape, weary souls moving among them like shadows. In her hands, she held a map, its edges frayed and ink slightly faded. The map was an enigma, a relic from a bygone era. It promised salvation, a hint of an underground city harboring a device capable of reviving a dying Earth. Ange traced the lines with her finger, heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This map, this worn piece of parchment, was a beacon of hope in her grim reality. "You're really going to go through with this?" came a voice from behind her. It was Marcus, a childhood friend wrapped in layers against the chilling breeze. His eyes, a stark blue amidst the dirt staining his face, searched hers with an earnest plea for her to stay. Ange turned to meet his gaze. "I have too, Marcus. We can't keep living like this, day after day, no future, nothing but survival," Marcus sighed, his shoulders slumping. "And what if it's just myth? A story to comfort us in the dark?" She swallowed hard, the weight of his doubts settling on her shoulders like the dust from a melancholic storm. "Then it's a risk I'm willing to take." Their eyes locked for a moment, a silent exchange of emotions, fear, hope, and a shared history that bound them together as tightly as any blood family. With a resigned nod, Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, the roughness of his palm a familiar comfort. "Then go," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "And come back." "I will." Her voice held a resolve she didn't entirely feel, the weakness beneath only she could sense. Ange turned back to the horizon, the barren expanse that mirrored the uncertainty grappling her heart. She clutched the map to her chest, convincing herself that this was the pathway to change. To believe otherwise was a surrender she refused to entertain. As she left, each step felt heavier, the ground beneath cracking under her shoes, the world a canvas of desolation. But for the first time in a long while, she felt the stirring of purpose, a glimmer of hope flickering amidst the ruins. Descending into the hollow belly of the earth, Ange felt the chill embrace of the underground gnawing at her resolve with each step. The tunnel walls were damp, the air heavy with the scent of mold and ancient dust, and every echo of her footfalls seemed to whisper warnings against the silence. The lantern she clutched was her sole source of light, casting faint, flickering shadows that danced mockingly along the stone walls. The once meticulously constructed passage had partially collapsed in places, debris strewn across her path. She breathed deep, steadying herself against the looming expanse of unknown. "You can do this," she muttered, forcing down the knot of fear twisting within her core. With each hesitant step forward, the temperature dropped, clinging to her skin with the dampness of the subterranean world. The cold was a living thing, wrapping around her, whispering doubts. Yet, her gaze remained resolute, following the map's old markings, still legible despite the passing centuries. Suddenly, a harsh click echoed in the narrow passage, followed by the shrill whir of gears engaging. Instinct took over as she leapt sideways, just as a set of jagged spikes erupted from a concealed panel in the floor. Heart pounding, she pressed herself against the cool stone wall, inhaling deeply to quell her rapid breath. "Come on, Ange, focus," she murmured, the sound absorbed into the oppressive silence. Wit and caution became her allies as traps unveiled themselves in cunning succession, blades that swung from shadows, pits that yawned beneath her feet, and darting projectiles from unseen slits in the stone. Memories of her childhood escapades through the wooded outskirts of her village came rushing back, recalling agility born of necessity. She paused, wiping sweat mingled with grime from her brow, her heart thundering against her ribs, a heady mix of fear and exhilaration. Yet, through the traps and trials, something awakened within her, each survived danger adding to her resolve. The underground city was not merely a stone labyrinth, it was a sentient entity testing her, challenging her right to seek the hope it concealed. With renewed determination, she pressed onward, her mind quieting into a focused clarity. Ahead, the passageway widened, opening into dimly lit chambers paved with engravings she couldn't decipher but felt their urgency. Ange, she could almost hear the whisper in the alien architecture, as if beckoning her deeper into its ancient embrace. Your journey is only beginning. And with that thought, she moved forward into the depths of mystery, her path dictated by fate and fragile hope. The shadows called her name, each corridor a crypt that whispered fragments of stories lost to time. Ange moved slowly, guided by both intuition and the steady pulse of her lantern. The air grew colder, filled with a ghostly quiet, broken only by the sounds echoing in the passageways. Her hair stood on end as she sensed an ethereal presence. There, in the dim light, figures began to materialize, wraith-like forms whose faces flickered between sad smiles and haunted stares. They drifted silently, their eyes glossy portals to a past she couldn't comprehend. "Who are you?" Ange asked aloud, more to herself than to the apparitions. Her voice, tremulous and thin, barely disrupted the silence. The figures floated close, revealing glimpses into their spectral lives, moments captured like snapshots, children playing among carefully tended gardens, architects shaping the future from stone and dreams. These inhabitants of an age long expired lived on in these spectral echoes. Implicitly compelled, Ange followed a particular phantom, a woman dressed in robes of ceremonial fabric that sparkled like ice, leading her down a corridor. Each step unearthed a sliver of the city's heartache, scenes of prosperity turned to dust strung along a pathway of forgotten glory. Suddenly, the apparitions receded, vanishing into thin shards of light. Standing alone once more, Ange felt the weight of their legacy settle heavily upon her. The narrative they composed brushed against her mind, revealing one sobering truth: the device she sought was more than mere metal and purpose, it was guarded by a sentinel. A voice, nebulous and omnipresent, resonated in the darkness. "Beware the official," it warned, sending a shiver sliding down her spine. "He commands us still. His duty is unyielding." Anger brewed within her, mingling with the cold fear settled at her base. The realization of what she must confront gnawed at her, undermining the very courage she clung to amidst these uncanny corridors. "I have to do this," Ange breathed, her words vaporizing in the cold vacuum. "I will learn your secrets, find my way to hope." With newfound resolve, she pressed onward, driven by the bittersweet emotions the specters inspired. There was no room for doubt, just the unwavering need for answers in the face of mystery, and the inexorable pull of destiny calling her deeper into the labyrinth's heart. Strategizing in the dim light of a narrow passage, Ange crouched low, back pressed against cool stone. She held her breath, listening intently to the silence that enveloped her like a shroud. The corridors, with their ancient carvings and tangled tunnels, felt like they harbored eyes of their own, quietly observing her every move. The official, a name whispered with both reverence and fear by the restless souls she'd encountered, was more than a guardian. He was the keeper of secrets, the protector of a device buried in myth as much as reality. She had to be cunning, find a way to navigate through his domain. Her mind flickered with possibilities, plans she clung to among the swirling shadows. Methodically, she traced her route on the map, seeking paths concealed beneath the veneer of illusion. The drawings shifted as if in protest, taunting her with incomprehensible glyphs and misleading signage. Ange sensed a strategy embedded in these falsities, a deliberate attempt to disorient intruders. "Not today," she murmured softly to the mocking walls, her voice a steely whisper. Pressing on, Ange's senses sharpened. A mechanical hum and the software of unseen gears resonated through the stone, a backdrop to her deliberate footsteps. Passageways riddled with deceit coiled ahead, but Ange's mind was clear, her heart unmoved by fear. She followed instinct, ignoring the enticing glow of false paths. One twist led her to a vast chamber, embellished with relics whispering tales of mysticism and wisdom. Strange instruments, far beyond her understanding, lay scattered among the gleaming ruins. They sang a chorus of humanity past, voices that still clung to secrets they refused to share easily. "The world does not need saving through destruction," Ange said, her voice resonating against the silence, part declaration, part plea, her conviction unwavering. From the artifacts, she pieced together the officials' vehement belief in Earth's rebirth through humanity's end, a chilling doctrine that threatened to erode her resolve. Anger kindled within her, a defiant fire fueling her mission. Eyes sharp, mind alert, she continued her journey, each step threaded with resolve and purpose. The official's domain was daunting, but Ange's spirit was undeterred. Yet, for all the trials, it was the challenging realization of Earth itself, a ravaged planet crying for renewal, that inspired her true path. She would be its voice, its champion, navigating this labyrinth with the tenacity of one who still believed in a future. The heart of the underground city thrummed with an energy that was palpable, a hum that vibrated through Ange's very bones. She stood at the entrance to a vast, echoing chamber, the flickering light from her lantern casting long shadows that danced with anticipation along the stone-carved walls. In the center, a silhouette emerged from the gloom, growing distinct in form and presence, a figure whose air was one of authority and ancient beauty. The official. He stood with an immutable gaze fixed upon Ange, a sentinel of the city's deepest secrets. "So you've come," the official's voice resonated through the chamber, deep and echoing as if drawn from the very stones around them. "Another supplicant seeking salvation where none exists." Ange's breath caught for a moment, but her resolve crystallized as the echoes of his words faded. "I haven't come to beg," she replied, holding her voice steady. "I've come to fulfill a promise to the future of humanity." The official's eyes, glinting like chips of flint, studied her intently. "And what makes you think humanity deserves such mercy?" He waved his hand, and the room around them seemed to ripple with illusions, images of oceans rising and forests burning, a world devoured by its children. The choking smog of the past, a visual history of neglect and ruin. "Because we can change," Ange shouted, her voice cutting through the visions like a blade. "If given a chance, fools and dreamers," the official cut her off, voice tinged with a wearied disbelief. "I've heard such cries before." The chamber closed in around them, the space between tension and hope taut as a bowstring. Ange stood firm, the pillars of her resolve supporting her against the storm of his words. "This device," Ange gestured toward the shadows, "it can be used to heal, to restore the balance, without cost of life." The official's expression shifted, a momentary flicker of doubt shadowing his rigid visage. "A naive idealism. You know not what you ask." "But I do," Ange insisted, her voice filled with an edge sharpened by necessity. "We must have hope, or else all is already lost." Her plea resonated through the depths, challenging his dogmatic resolve. Their eyes locked, a battle not of brawn but of wills and dreams and tenacity. Ange could see the struggle within him, reflected in the dark constraint of her own determination. It was not just a debate of ideals, but a fundamental confrontation of faiths. "Then prove it," the official finally conceded, voice tinged with an unspoken challenge, a sliver of potential yielding within the rigid lines of his face. In that moment, Ange knew she must fight not merely with words but with the core of her belief in a future reborn, a confrontation taking her deeper into the heart of the city's truth. The chamber's atmosphere pulsed with tension, an electric charge that Ange could almost taste as she stepped closer to the official. The gloom lifted slightly, revealing a complex array of machinery that filled the space, a testament to an ancient civilization's ingenuity. Each component hummed with potential, its power dormant yet palpable. Standing across from the official, Ange could sense his conflict, his duty bound by years of unwavering belief. Yet, a crack had appeared in his armor of certainty, a fracture that she knew she must exploit. "You think me weak," the official said, a bitter edge to his voice, "bound only by my duty. But this path is wrought with deep measure." "No," Ange returned, stepping toward him with unwavering conviction. "You're blind to possibility, chained by a history you cannot alter." As she glanced around the room, the illusions he cast began to blur, fading into echoes of reality. Memories of what once was, spun from a misguided sense of righteousness. Seizing the moment, Ange pushed forward, not just physically but in spirit. "You don't have to hold on to such shadows," she insisted, her voice a gentle lure, beckoning hope. The official hesitated, a moment so brief yet profound that it shifted the axis of their confrontation. "Reveal the truth," Ange urged, drawing upon the strength of love and resolve. With deft hands, Ange manipulated the surrounding mechanisms, disrupting the illusions clouding his vision. The machinery responded to her touch, thrumming with life under her focused guidance. The official's face twisted with dawning realization, his eyes darting over the newly revealed landscape of truth. The world he had sought to protect lay displayed before him in stark relief, its potential both to destroy and to heal. "What have you done?" he whispered, the words trailing off as wonder bled into his voice. "Opened your eyes," Ange replied softly, locking her gaze with his, a connection etched in a shared understanding. Faced with reality, the official seemed to crumble, his certainty eroding like sand beneath the tide. Yet, through his defeat, a dawn of humility emerged. "Use it wisely," he said finally, with a delivery stripped of artifice, a man relinquished to time. Ange nodded, stepping forward to embrace the task ahead. As she activated the mechanism, energy thrummed through the chamber, a promise intertwined with her hopeful resolve. "For life," Ange whispered, the words binding her to the mission as she turned toward the path of rejuvenation, a beacon guiding her path from the shadows to the surface. The ascent to the surface felt longer than the descent, yet each step seemed lighter, buoyed by a hope unseen. As Ange emerged from the depths, she blinked against the harsh brightness of daylight, a stark contrast to the subterranean gloom she'd grown accustomed to. The sky framed the horizon like a great canvas painted with the strokes of a dawning day, the sun's rays breaking through the tattered clouds in victorious exclamation. Around her, a landscape rendered barren by neglect awaited renewal, its scorched visage ready to embrace the green promise of life. Ange stood for a moment, breathing deeply, savoring the crisp air tinged with the biting freshness of possibility. Around her, the scattered remnants of her community gathered, drawn by the shimmering waves of energy cascading forth from the device in her hands. "Ange!" Marcus hailed, his voice brimming with a mix of incredulity and joy, as he strode toward her. His eyes, bright with awe, met hers and captured a triumph they both had scarcely dared to dream. "You did it," he breathed, clasping her shoulders in a gesture of validation and shared victory. Together, with their cautious optimism echoing in every heartbeat, they turned to face the future, activated the device, and watched. The earth's wounded skin began to heal before their eyes as tendrils of green erupted from the ground, a carpet of lush vegetation unfurling in defiance of the desolation etched in memory. The air shimmered with the vitality of change, the ground beneath them warm with the pulse of renewal. Yet, Ange understood that this was merely a beginning, a chance fraught with responsibility and balance. Ange looked over at Marcus and the others, registering the cautious hope mirrored in their expressions. The world around them was transforming, each new leaf and blossom a testament to resilience, a narrative of survival and the human spirit's capacity for growth. As her community embraced this new reality, Ange allowed herself a moment to reflect. Her journey had not been one of solitude but a testament to perseverance and belief in realms bound by neither shadow nor light. "It's only the beginning," she whispered to the sky, feeling a profound sense of connection to both earth and time. The future lay open before them, uncharted and full of promise. Ange knew this truth as she held fast to the delicate balance of power and humility, a dance her spirit was now irrevocably tied to, as life began anew under a sun that had finally consented